are going to first, before I introduce Andrea, when we start talking with Andrea, this is a conversation where I will be interviewing her, and we're going to have a chance to really understand a couple of different things about the art of professional pivoting. First, we're going to just get some context to hear a little bit from Andrea about her story and what professional pivoting is looking like for her. And I say is looking like because this is something that is not just for a certain point of our careers, right? We have lots of blooms and there are many different ways that we pivot and develop as we go through a professional space. So that is why I'm using a present tense when we're going to talk about and when Andrea's going to share with us a bit of her story. She will be sharing about some of the lessons she's learned along the way and some of the insights she's gained about what it's looked like for her. So that's our first part about context. The majority of our conversation is going to be focusing really on what are some of those things that she's learned, she's heard from interviewing thousands of people about specific steps and approaches that we can all take to help make our career pivoting a little bit more purposeful, to add some intention to it. So those are super, super specific action-oriented things that you're going to have with you when we're finished with this conversation. We have lots of time later for questions and answers and Q&A time with Andrea, and Liao is going to say something about how to register your questions in a moment. And then we have some surprises at the end, but Andrea is going to say a little bit more about that in a moment. So we're first just going to get a little bit of context and background. Then we're going to really focus on some concrete steps and some approaches you can use right now or whenever it feels right for you to think about what's next. And then we'll have lots of time for Q&A. One of the main things I want to make before I turn to introducing Andrea is that we really wanted to emphasize that this conversation is for all of us, any point in our careers. It is not just in the beginning, it's not just in the middle, and it's not just at the end, right? That pivoting and creating is for all of us at any point in our professional space. So just really want to underscore that message. So Andrea Koppel is the CEO and founder of Time for Coffee, which is a company that delivers firsthand career insights and advice to help professionals build careers they love, regardless of where they went to school or who they know. And so she leverages thousands of different interviews and resources that she has gathered over her extensive career to help professionals build the careers that they love. She has had many different titles, worked in journalism, public relations, advocacy, policy. She's an entrepreneur, she's a mentor, she's a coach, and I'm so glad that she's joining us today. Andrea and I know each other from when we worked at CNN. We were both covering Asia in different ways and have a particular love for China and all of the issues related to that particular space. So with that, Andrea, I want to welcome you and just thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Claudia. As if anybody knows Claudia, she's one of the world's most delightful people, in addition to being incredibly smart and unbelievably capable in her extensive professional life. So thank you so much for inviting me, Claudia. Thank you to Liao. Thank you to Comm Lead for bringing me back, which is awesome. I was here a couple of months ago. And before we dive into the zigs and zags that I've had and takeaways that I hope will help you, I want to let you know that for those of you who stick around until the end, I have 5 of my favorite job seeking tools that I've created that I'm going to give all of you for free. But you have to stick around until the end. And I promise you, these tools will save you not just hours of banging your head against the wall, but days, if not weeks of doing that, because I've tried to fast track get around a lot of the mistakes that people end up making in their networking and in their outreach to try to land the dream job that they're looking for. So do you want me to get into my career, or do you want to ask me a question, Claudia?
You know what, let me just sort of frame the question, and then that can help sort of give some context. And for those of you who are in the Comm program, because of the work we do around communication and leadership, I'd invite you to also, engage in this conversation with Andrea, not just from what she's saying, but also what she's doing and how she's showing up as a communicator in this session, right? And some of the things that you can maybe think about in terms of being in the program itself right now. Andrea, the title of this conversation is The Art of Professional Pivoting, right? And can you just tell us a little bit, some context about what that's looked like for you and some of the things you've maybe learned along the way, particularly in the beginning parts of your career? Just give us a little bit of context.
Sure. Well, let me start off with a quick question. If you could just put a thumbs up or a hand up if you are a grad student right now. And then okay, you can take that off, thank you. And then for those of you who are undergrads, if you're undergrads who are in school, anybody still in school right now, undergrad? No? So the rest of you are working professionals? That is helpful to me. Okay, thank you. So when I was an undergrad, I was a political science major with a concentration in Asian studies and Chinese. I thought I wanted to be a diplomat. Then I did my junior year abroad in Taiwan. I actually met an American diplomat, and he convinced me that that was probably not the right career path for me. So when I graduated college, I had been accepted to go into the US Peace Corps to go to Nepal. I had no idea what I was going to do after that, but that was going to be a first step. Within a couple months of graduation, before I was supposed to leave for Nepal, that plan went sideways. I did not have a plan B. That was my only plan, okay? And what happened is what I like to call magic. Some people would call it serendipity, but I think there is a wonderful thing that happens throughout our lives, and that is people. We meet people. We have different experiences that end up influencing, affecting the direction that we're going to be moving in. The magic that happened to me is that there was a friend of my family's who lived in mainland China, just so happened to be in the US, had just come from New York and learned that I was unemployed. And he said, oh, well, this woman I met in New York, she has a job opening. She only hires young women who speak Mandarin. What are the chances that something like that was going to happen? And this was several decades ago. I wasn't interested in business, but my parents said, just go interview for the job. You can always turn it down. Within a couple of weeks, I was on a plane flying to Beijing for this new job. As I suspected, I didn't love the job, but all of my friends were journalists. And that is when it hit me. That is what I want to do. I actually want to do what they're doing. And I'd listened to their stories. It was super exciting. And it just resonated with me in a way that nothing had until that point. So I quit my job. I moved back to the US. I proceeded to spend 20 years as a journalist. And I thought I was going to be a journalist for the rest of my life until I was fired. I had been with CNN for 14 years. There was a new president who took over, and I was not his cup of tea. So they didn't renew my contract. And it was devastating. It was embarrassing because, of course, they leaked it to the media that they hadn't renewed my contract. I couldn't even leave with a modicum of self-respect. And I ended up meeting people for coffee. I just wanted to kind of pick their brains, get a sense of what options might be open to somebody who had really only ever been a journalist. And I decided I didn't want to stay in that field. And I learned through these real in-person coffees that there was a niche within public relations in which various companies only represent nonprofits and foundations and different causes, kind of the white hats. And that resonated with me. And I was introduced, please keep that in mind, I was introduced to the president of one of these firms. There was no job opening. I just went in to meet him. We had a great conversation, and he said to me, Andrea, I think you would be perfect as the head of our communications team. There's someone in the job right now, but she's not working out. Fast forward, I get offered that job. I did it for 1 year and 9 months. What I didn't realize when I took the job, everybody knew I didn't know public relations, but I had never managed a team before. I had never really been in an office. I was a journalist. I'd go out and cover stories. I have a producer, I have a photographer, sometimes a sound person, and that was the unit. And even though I did certain aspects of the job really well, I really wasn't a good manager. And 1 year and 9 months after I started, they fired me. And I'm like, what the hell is going on? Is there a dark cloud over my head? And I start like scrambling because I need to find another job quickly at this point. I wasn't earning quite as much money in this second job as I had been at CNN. I had bills to pay. So I took the first job I was offered, which was working for a nonprofit. I knew I wasn't going to love that job, but I took it because I knew it would feel good. It resonated with kind of my values, my mission orientation. I took it, I used it as a stepping stone to another nonprofit where I was the vice president of global affairs and policy. Okay. Now, I told you I was a political science major, Asian studies, Chinese. I didn't study journalism. I didn't study public relations. And I certainly didn't work in government or have a real policy background. I didn't have a master's either. I ended up doing that for 6 years. And then I quit 4 years ago because I decided, my personal situation had changed. My son was 13 and I wanted to be a full-time mom. The podcast, Time for Coffee podcast idea came to me because I finally had radical headspace. I was able to dream and imagine. I identified a need. I knew I had a skill set. So I started building the podcast. I've now interviewed hundreds of professionals in dozens of different industries about what they do and how they built their careers. And that is what helped me because I said, holy cow, there are all these cross-cutting themes that I am hearing from professionals in all kinds of industries that I'm not hearing others in sort of the public arena talk about. What are the takeaways? The takeaways are transferable skills are everything. You need to take out a sheet of paper and write down what your hard skills are, what your hard/technical skills are, what your soft skills are, those interpersonal skills, which I know you all are in Seattle or other parts of the world where you may be thinking everything is about the technology. I have to know how to code. I have to know how to do digital marketing. If you can't get along, if you don't have emotional intelligence, adaptability, teamwork, a self-starter, all of those soft skills, that is what employers value more than anything else. And then the third column is around your interests. Your hard and soft skills will align with a job function, whether it's a communicator, creativity, finance, accounting, marketing, what would some others be? Research, project management, technical, right? Job functions, hard and soft skills. Interests, your interests align with just about every single industry out there. And those job functions are cross-cutting into all those industries. So what I have learned is that your major, whatever you majored in college, whatever you are majoring in right now, is not the tiny house that you're going to be forced to live in for the rest of your lives. Instead, it is the foundation of a professional skyscraper that you will be and have started building, with each new job and each new career adding a new floor in your professional skyscraper. So I could continue on and on, but this is supposed to be a conversation. So let me turn things back to Claudia.
Well, this is why it's always good, like, you know, you and I need to be on a long haul flight again when the sort of world allows, that we can just sort of go through this for hours and hours. But I'd like to kind of keep building on a couple of points that you're saying, that, you know, thank you for sharing that with us so openly about your own experience, Andrea, right? Because I think so many times, especially in the social media days, you know, we see sort of certain stories that kind of present a certain way, and then they actually don't show all the stuff that's kind of behind the curtain. So I just want to acknowledge you showing up for us in that space. You know, a couple of things that I heard you talk about is in terms of look, that, you know, the transferable skills are everything. A lot of networking, a lot of getting into conversation with people around what they do, people who are interested, who are working in areas you're interested in, you know. But I'd like to just kind of focus on a particular part, and that is the pieces around, okay, so let's break this down a little bit more, right? So if I'm someone who is interested in my next pivot or my next place, I either am in an industry here and I want to go over there, okay? I might be really clear, how can I get over there? Or I might be in a place of, it feels like a change, but I'm not sure how to actually start. What are some of the specific things you would say, start here? Here are these specific things you can do. You started talking about, you know, the interests and the functions, but what are some of the, like, do this today?
So 80% of jobs are hidden. Mm-hmm. And what do I mean by that? I mean, they haven't been posted yet. Maybe like the situation when I went into that PR firm and the president said to me, this person isn't working out, but I think you'd be great for that. 80% of jobs are hidden. And the purpose of networking is multifold. It can be to learn more about a job you know you're interested in an industry that you think you may be interested in, or it can be learning more about a job you're not sure if you're interested in. You really want to learn what that person does. Mm-hmm. And so I cannot emphasize enough the incredible value in marketing. Not only in networking, not only are you going to be able to uncover those hidden jobs, because it is through referrals and it's through meeting people in these different companies that you're going to learn about them. And it may not be jobs that exist in their company. It may be they know about jobs elsewhere. Okay. But you will also be able to start answering some of those questions in your own mind about whether or not a particular industry would be a good fit, whether or not a particular company is in fact as great as its marketing materials say it is, by talking to people who work there now or who recently worked there. And you can find them on LinkedIn. And in fact, some of those free tools that I mentioned at the beginning, I show you how to find them, specifically using your alumni network, and how you can use the UW alumni network if you're a UW alum, or if you went to another school, how you can use that, because you want to find the areas of commonality with the person that you're connecting with on LinkedIn before you reach out. So this isn't like spray and pray where you just hit the connect button randomly looking for people with senior titles and SVP and EVP, the CEO, the president, the COO. No. You want to ideally be targeting somebody who is in a role you are interested in right now. And you want to be able to say to them when you reach out on LinkedIn and put, definitely add that note. It's 300 characters. You'll say, hey, I'm a UW alum. I graduated XX. I see you are. I also see we were both marketing majors. I would love to chat with you about what you're doing now. Thanks, would love to connect. And then
I think a lot of us are going to we're going to come back and write that down. So hopefully that's fine with you. We've like stolen that note that you've just said for LinkedIn. We'll use that like cut and paste for our outreach.
Yeah, in fact, I think I have that in the tools. I kind of break that out a little bit more, but you want to establish that human connection. Why should they connect with you? And then after they accept, you can say, would love to grab 25, 30 minutes of your time. Would, the following week work, or what days work for you? If you have a Calendly or an assistant you want me to work with, I'm cool with that. And then you have an informational interview.
Right.
And that is when you ask those questions to uncover more about that job, more about possibly other jobs, but you're not asking for a job. Whatever you do, do not say, do you have a job where you could hire me? This is an opportunity for you to gather information. But of course, you want to impress them so that you will be front of mind when they hear about an opportunity. And at the end of that conversation, you want to say, hey, are there a couple other people that you might be able to recommend for me to speak with? And this is how you grow your network. And this is how you uncover those opportunities and learn about what that pivot, that next opportunity, that next job, that next industry could be like for you. And you should be looking for people who maybe pivoted from a different background into that industry. Really go through their LinkedIn profile, and that would give you another great entry point to say, hey, I see you were doing X and you're now doing Y. I'm also doing another kind of an X and I want to do Y. I would love to learn from you how you sold yourself, how you were able to present yourself as a strong candidate.
It's really true, isn't it? That so often, I mean, very rarely, I haven't seen, if you ask someone to talk about themselves, very rarely are you going to get a no from that. If you ask someone that you want to hear about their story and learn from them, that is often such a good, most people like to share their own story, right? And so thank you for
100%.
that. I have a question. I'd like to sort of stay with a piece that has come up, I think, for myself as well. I've heard from other conversations around pivoting, and that's around the timing of pivoting, right? Because I've heard sort of contradictory things that sometimes people say, oh, is it too early? I'm too young in my career to sort of change careers yet because I need to get more experience. I need to build up more of those transferable skills. And then at the same time, I've heard, and sometimes I think this myself, like, oh, well, I've been working in this one area too much, or I've been working in the same business, in the same field for so long. Is it too late? So there's a funny duality of when, is there a time to pivot, or what would you say about who gets to pivot? When can we pivot? Is it too early or is it too late? Sort of just reflect on this a little bit, because I find that mindset we have going into then building relationships and having networking, having those conversations really, really shapes that success.
Yeah, it's
what would you say about that?
It's a great question, Claudia. And my answer is it depends. And I hope you don't see that as a cop-out, but everyone's story, everyone's journey is different. If you are in a job you hate, if you are suffering, and I've been there, my friends. That was the job that I had after I was fired the second time before I moved to Mercy Corps, where I stayed for 6 years. I did sort of grin and bear it until the first year mark. It's not the end of the world. I started looking 6 months before the 1 year anniversary. So be tactical, think about it as, if you are absolutely miserable and like I did, after 6 months in that first job, after I graduated from school, I was in China and I knew that I didn't want to stay in business, right? I quit, I came back, and I started networking to break into journalism. P.S. I want to give one little aside there. I learned your extracurricular activities, your interests, your clubs, your volunteer work, those are the breadcrumbs to follow. I had been involved in the college radio station since I started. I was news director at the Middlebury College radio station. When I graduated, I did not realize that my extracurricular was like a red flashing light to me, or that particular one, that's where my interests lie. I didn't know that you would go into a career just because, right? So if you're miserable, my feeling is you should not have to suffer indefinitely, and you'll be the best judge. But don't quit, really. I mean, when I quit, it was a long time ago. I would not say today, don't quit unless you have your next job lined up. In terms of when is the right time to pivot, if you're bored in your current job, if you feel that the opportunity for upward mobility is, you've like maxed out, if you feel that your employers are not investing in you, you want to have them invest in you, and you just feel like you've kind of maxed out where you are, it's up to you. Like, you could stay in the same industry. Otherwise, it's about how you tell your story, how you describe your skills, and it's projecting confidence, right? If you're not confident, right? Everybody expects you're going to have a certain amount of learning on the job, right? You tell them, I'm a quick study. I'm reading books on such and such right now. I've done a lot of research into this. I have these fundamental skills that I know because I've spoken to others who are in the industry, they also are using right now. So I have no doubt that I'll be able to step into the role and meet the requirements and excel. Okay. So I would say it's about if you see yourself in that job description, and not 100%, not even 70%, if you see yourself 50% in a job description and it feels like a good place and you've done your research and you've been networking, I would say throw your hat in the ring.
So a couple of myths I hear being busted here is that, like, the framing of like, it's, you either think about too young or too early or too late. It's not this kind of linear way of thinking about it's the time to pivot. So that's one of the first things to just kind of bust out of our mindset. The other piece is I hear, follow those interests. Like, what are actually the things that we enjoy doing or that we enjoyed doing, right? That they may actually be more of a gemstone than we realize if we're thinking about what's next, right? And that's another thing that I wanted to ask in terms of one of those myths is that sometimes when we're thinking about pivoting, we may think like, oh, I've got this title now. I work in project management, but I'm really interested in sales. So how can I be sales? So what would you say about the kind of role title
Yeah.
plays? And I know we're going to check in, Leo, in a moment with some questions, but if we could just get some sense from you, Andrea, like how much should we be thinking about titles?
Yeah. So here's something that was actually shocking to me that I have learned since I became a coach. And that is job titles are made up. They are
What do you mean?
100% made up by the companies themselves. They decide. I mean, I'll just tell you right now, one of my titles, Chief Java Junkie. I mean, okay, I recognize I'm a solopreneur, but look at these companies. You can have people doing the exact same job function with a different title, which is why you should be expansive looking at job titles. Job postings as well are also a lot of the requirements and blah, 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 blah that they're putting in there is like a Christmas wish list, which is why I said only look at 50%. So I would say, again, this comes to networking.
Mm-hmm.
You need to talk to people at other companies who you believe are doing a similar job function. And you can Google sometimes their resumes are on, well, first of all, you can look on LinkedIn and see what their career trajectory has been, what their major was, what their roles were. And then you can look at those companies. You're going to have to do a little detective work here. It shouldn't be too difficult, but to then set up a short networking call with them, informational interview, where you ask them, could you talk to me about what the software, the tools are that you're using in your job? What does a typical day look like? I'm in sales. I'm on the phone. I'm meeting clients. I'm doing X, Y, and Z. It kind of looks like you're in sales, but could you walk me through what you're doing?
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then when you start connecting those dots, okay, that's how you're going to sell yourself into that new role. And employers aren't always as creative as I am sharing with you right now, which is why you need to paint the picture. You need to be able to talk about the impact that you have had in your role. So this is maybe taking things a step further, but don't just list out the responsibilities that you have had in your various prior roles and current role.
Mm-hmm.
You need to be showing the impact, the change that you brought to that role. And that using metrics, whether it's you're showing a 10%, 15%, 5% difference that you've been able to have, you want to show them, not tell them what you've done.
So, such a good piece. I'm going to push this on one more question before we turn to the questions, because I'm sure there are a lot. Is just that piece right there about, getting ready to show our impact, right? We're sort of, you inventory your story for impact, right? So how do we do that? So I'm sitting here and I'm saying, you know what, I am ready. I've got some good folks who I know I want to reach out to. We've got the meetings booked. And now I want to be able to talk about what I've done in a way that demonstrates impact and doesn't just go down the laundry list. But how do I do that? How do I get there? How can I inventory my impact?
So that's a much more in-depth question, but let me just ask you this. Is this for an informational interview or is this for a job interview?
I would say just starting from that informational interview piece in
I
terms
wouldn't worry about
of
it there.
networks.
I would not worry about it. And it shouldn't be about you when you do informational interviews. You want to give them, like, you obviously begin by asking them how they are. Again, you want to make a heart-to-heart connection, depending upon where you are in the world, what's going on in the world. And then you want to say, would it be okay if I just gave you a quick overview of who I am so that you understand where I'm coming from? And that's where you give them like a 90-second to 2-minute encapsulation of what your job experiences have been.
Well,
And
we might need to have then a second fireside chat around the inventory, your impact, or how do you do that in
so
terms
they
of,
don't need to hear, you're not interviewing for a job, you are looking to extract information. So that's why I was asking for the clarification. So this is for you to gather information so that you can better decipher whether or not, in fact, your experiences to date might be relevant in that other industry. But I just want to emphasize again that whether you're a communicator, somebody who's been in finance, marketing, research, technical, all of those job functions exist in a bazillion different industries. And the industries should align with your interests. So if you're marketing, you don't just have to move over into another marketing company. You know, there are all different types of jobs that you can do as a marketer that if you're more interested in communications, that would work. So it really does depend upon kind of what your personal superpowers are and what your hard and soft skills are.
Okay, so then really focus on the functions and the title, just kind of have that be some kind of background noise. Just don't get fixated on that. Like, oh, I haven't worked in innovation, I haven't worked in sales.
Correct.
Just focus on that function.
Correct. And I would also say the Gen Z and the millennials, well, probably more Gen Z, but you're going to have 5 different careers and 17 different jobs on average over the course of your career. I have probably had that already. If you look at all the jobs I had in journalism and all that. So this is expected. It's just about learning how to sell yourself to these new industries if you want to pivot into a completely different industry.
So many things that we could keep talking about. And I know your website, Time for Coffee, has so much more to unpack what we've been talking about. I'm going to take a pause right here. Andrea, I'm not going to thank you yet because we're not done yet, because I want to turn to Liao what kind of questions, comments, reactions are coming up. So Liao, please.
Thank you, Claudia, and thank you, Andrea. We do have a couple of questions from our participants, and one of them is come from our Associate Director, Gretchen. I wonder, Gretchen, if you want to unmute yourself and ask the question about Zoom network.
Thank you. Thanks for being here, Andrea and Claudia. This is great. I love this topic, and I'm a pivoter myself. Once I learned about informational interviewing, I never looked back, and it's really what I learned about it is that it's actually fun. Because it can engage in, especially as communicators, as journalists, learning someone else's story is so, it's part of our work, and it's what we're good at. And I'm also an introvert somewhat. So learning those skills to do it, it's actually a skill, to almost put on that hat into an interview and say, I'm actually working right now in interviewing this person to learn as much as I can. But the thing about what I've been learning in this Zoom environment is that, you hear everybody is so zoomed out. Everybody is just tired of meeting on the screen. And it feels, that anxiety that I have and other people share about reaching out to people and, getting some of their time, Yeah, the phone, right. So I wanted to hear some ideas that you had about how we can maybe leverage this opportunity to create more opportunities for ourselves to connect with people, network with people.
Yeah, 100%. I would say they don't want to Zoom with you, to be perfectly honest. They're Zoomed out as well. You're not the only ones. Most professionals are Zoomed out and they want to have it over the phone. Why? Because many of them are multitasking when they're talking with you, right? They're walking the dog or they're driving or they're fitting it into their day. So it's actually easier for them. And you can come right out and say, I just would love to chat with you on the phone. Like, I know we're all Zoomed out, and would that work for you? And you probably would get more time that way as well if it's over the phone. And it's a great, I totally agree, Gretchen. It's a great way. It is enriching to do this. And I have spoken to a number of introverts who have said like it like doesn't feel comfortable to me. So I recommend writing out your questions, having them there on the screen. And the truth is you're going to be doing more listening than you are talking. So hopefully it'll keep you in your comfort zone and, we'll only be stretching you a bit, but this is a wonderful opportunity for you to learn. And PS, you're going to be learning and adapting as a requirement. We all are every 3 to 5 years anyway, because that's how quick this new digital marketplace is growing and changing and adapting, and we need to be able to adapt with it.
Thank you. I love that idea about the phone. We all have to remember how to do that.
Right, imagine that, the telephone, right?
That's funny. Thank you, Andrea. We also have another question from our student, Brooke. She's also our colleague student assistant in charge of our Instagram accounts. Thank you for promoting our event today. So Brooke, would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question for Andrea?
Yes, I'd love to. Hi, Andrea.
Hi, Brooke.
I have been, I've been doing a lot of informational interviews lately, and I'm fine. I feel like I'm fine with asking questions about what you do because I love learning about people. But then I always get to this weird sticking point where I'm like, okay, now like I want to ask for them to introduce me to someone, or I want to make it clear that I'm going to be looking for jobs in this area, but I don't want to put them on the spot and I don't want to make them feel weird. Like, how do you make sort of that? How do you do that gracefully? Because I always get like red in the face and I'm like, okay, so yeah, please help me.
Well, fortunately, you'll be on the phone and they won't see that you've flushed. And I would say they get it, right? They get why you're calling them. And that's the purpose of that at the very beginning, after you ask them how they are, because we can be so like, I can be robotic too. I don't mean this as a slight. I mean it as just we get like in the zone and we're like, oh, I only have so much time. And like, okay, so I'd like to ask you this, as opposed to saying, hi, how are you? How's your day going? If you know what city they're in, and I recommend checking. I saw that there were fires recently, or I see you guys have been like drowning under 5 days of rain. Have you taken out the boat yet? Like, break the ice. If you have a connection, like something in common with them, either you had the same major, you want to really be examining their LinkedIn profile. Look for something to break the ice at the beginning, and then say, is it okay if I just give you a quick overview of who I am? I've been in the communications field for the last 10 years. I've primarily been in XYZ roles. I am really interested in exploring, to your point, Brooke, You just get it out of the way at the beginning. In exploring opportunities in your field, which is another reason why I'm so appreciative to you that you've made time for me today. You're not asking them for a job. You're saying, I really want to learn more about it. And I'm super excited to learn about it, right? So then they're talking, and at the end of the call, you just muscle up that courage and you say, hey, if I would be over the moon if you had one or two other people that you think might be a good fit for me to speak to, because the more you talk about what you're doing, the more I'm thinking, yeah, that actually really does sound cool. Or maybe they could be working at different companies. Like, what would you recommend? Or maybe they're working elsewhere in your company. And then you pause because you want them to give you that information now. That is gold right there when they give it to you, because you're going to put that in the subject line, whether it's in your LinkedIn outreach. If you're not connected, it'll be in your LinkedIn message, but they will probably give you their email. And then you're going to say, blank, 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 recommended I speak with you. You better believe they're going to respond to that email. And then you do the same thing with them at the end of the call. You know, the more I hear about this, the more I think I might be more inclined towards such and such a role. Do those kind of roles exist? Oh, they do? Do you know anybody who's doing them? You see what I'm saying? You got to be in the moment, listening to what they're saying, and they are there. They want to help you. As Claudia said, most professionals want to pay it forward, and they get it. They have been in your shoes. We've all been in your shoes. And that's one final thing I wanted to say. The way that you find your, let's use the word passion, because I don't believe it is something we've all just naturally, identified at age 22 or even at age 30. The way you find it is not by following a recipe. It is by doing it. It's by being a mad scientist in a lab with test tubes, and you're throwing shit in the test tube, and you may be blowing something up the way that I did when I went into public relations. You may have black smoke all over your face, whatever. It's all good, because the way that you find your passion is through those experiences. You must try it. You must do it. And you can sample it through informational interviews. You can get a taste of it, but you actually have to do it to know if it's going to work for you or not. And to Claudia's earlier question, if it isn't a good fit and it's an okay job, like, stay through the year, start looking 6 months before and pivot again. And you just tell the employer, you never say anything bad about your prior employer. It was, really interesting, but I felt like I needed a bigger company, a smaller company. I felt like you spin it.
I hear another myth busted, that the art of pivoting has some beautifully crafted, engineered sort of, here's how to do it, and then you can go out and do it. So that's the first myth.
Yes.
Like, the art is just that agility and availability to put yourself out there. The second thing is that, I have to know how to do all this before I go out and do it. And the takeaway that I'm hearing from you, Andrea, is like, the how comes when you get out there and start doing it. So Exactly. It's actually the reverse.
Yeah, you can preview it in informational interviews. And maybe even in job interviews, as you get a vibe, a sense of the office, a sense of the culture. But it is only through the doing that you really know if it's a good fit or not for you. And I want to add an addendum to my two things blowing up in my face when CNN didn't renew my contract and then when I was fired from that PR firm. In both cases, I came to see it as an incredible gift. I had been unhappy at CNN for 3 years before they let me go, but I was afraid to leave because I didn't think there was anything else I could do. That doesn't mean I wanted them to fire me and then leak that to the media, but you know what? It was all good. It stung, it was painful, but it's my story. It's who I am. It's how I showed resilience and I discovered my next step. And even though this is recorded, I will say I did get a little payout. So that helped to cushion the blow. All right. Then I pivoted into my next role. I did not love PR. I did not love that. I probably would have given it another 2 or 3 years. They made the decision for me. And then I moved into the nonprofit world and I didn't love that first job, but I loved the next one in the nonprofit world. You can and probably will have multiple passions. You may identify multiple purposes in your life as you evolve and change, as your priorities in your life evolve and change. And it is only through doing that you discover it.
Well, I know on your website you have kind of like the Goldilocks reference to it was too hot, that job was too cold, and then you found the just right? By going out and taking the temperature, right? You can't do that from an armchair. You can't do it behind your screen. You can't do it by just clicking here to apply without that interactive of going out and connecting with people through things like the phone.
Totally. And it's the bad porridge is still good enough. I still learn things working for the employers who were terrible managers, who were, awful human beings. I learned the kind of manager I didn't want to be. So, yeah.
It's such a powerful question, isn't it? That when we're in a situation to say, oh, what can I learn from this? Or how is this working for me? Very, inappropriate. I'm not talking about those kinds of situations where we're not just staying open to it, but sort of generally that sense of, oh, how is this actually for my benefit, right? Leo, we have a couple more minutes, so we want to see what else is.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I think we can take one more questions. And if you want to ask, you can just raise your hand or unmute yourself directly.
Anything with job searching strategies. You will be getting those 5 job search tools in just a few moments. But I'm happy to give you some advice. I also want to let you know that imposter syndrome, especially prevalent in pivoting. I felt it every time I pivoted. I have found out from interviewing hundreds of professionals in dozens of industries, they experience it too, okay? It is natural to feel that way. That doesn't mean you don't belong.
Yeah.
It just means you are pushing yourself outside your comfort zone, and that is how you grow. So you are in exactly the right place.
Thank you, Andrea. I see Jacqueline just raised her hands. Would you like to ask your question, Jacqueline?
Hi, yes, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I think I'm a little bit of an outlier, but I know there's other people in this group in my category where I graduated from the Comm Lead program last June, but I am in my second career. So I'm a former military, spent 21 years in there, got very in-depth experience. And my pivot entails going into an industry where I have zero experience. And so I decided I want to be a screenwriter now. So trying to connect, fortunately, there's organizations out there to help connect veterans to people who do in that industry. But one of the things that I feel the need to overcome, and I was wondering if you can offer any advice in terms of developing a strategy, is how do I quickly get up to speed in this new industry that I know nothing about? You know, how can I, what's the most efficient way to do that? And then part of me, just a little bit, is hesitating. What if I dip my toe in this and it's not, what's the pace at which I should immerse myself? I kind of feel like I should treat it like a job, even though I'm not in a job right now. I'm getting paid and devote that much time daily to get myself to learn about the industry and get connected with people in the ways that you had suggested.
Yes.
Do you have any
Oh,
other?
that is such a great question, Jacqueline. I guess I have a couple of follow-up questions to be able to advise you properly. Have you ever written a screenplay? Have you ever taken a class in screenplay writing?
No. So what I've done so far is signed up for a masterclass and listening to a
Great.
couple of authors on there. I signed up for a couple of local Writers Club screenwriting programs and looking
Yes.
into an MFA program at Goddard College.
Yes.
And then I've connected with a couple screenwriters,
Okay.
one of who's going to mentor me for the year. And then I'm also researching fellowships for new emerging screenwriters for people of color.
Beautiful. If you listen to the interview that I did with Leslie Linka Glatter on the Time for Coffee website, I would listen to both the espresso shots interview. Those are the interviews where I asked 10 questions about how listeners can break into their industry. So Leslie Linka Glatter was the executive director of Homeland. She's also directed a bazillion other amazing shows that you've heard of. I would listen to her Espresso Shots interview because she does talk about some of these potential fellowship for women.
Oh, great.
Yeah. And then also her main Time for Coffee interview. And I could also connect you to a relative of mine who has been writing screenplays and has been, you know, in a very scrappy way about it. I might say that again, I'm not asking you to put this out there right now, but whether you have the luxury of not having to like pay the bills while this is going on, what your time frame is, but it sounds like maybe you have flexibility around that.
Yeah, I do. And time frame to happen as soon as possible.
And okay. And so I would just say, like, go for it.
Great. Yeah. I
We
feel
only go around once. Like, go for it. Jump off the high dive. Do it.
Yeah. I think listening to your presentation has validated my decision, and I feel grateful for that. So thank you.
Yay.
Well, and that's one of the reasons that we wanted to host this conversation, is because this kind of space is not for the faint of heart, right? I think when we're thinking about pivoting, regardless of where we are in our careers, it can bring up a lot of intensity, which is why so many people don't do it, right? So there is power in just the community of meeting other people, being in the space. So that was also some of the intention behind this. Okay. Yeah. And for those of us old enough to remember a Rolodex, I don't know anyone who has a bigger Rolodex than Andrea. And if you go onto her website, you will see that Rolodex showing up in interviews. So if you do nothing else, pour through that platform of content.
You can search on the homepage by industry as well. And you can also, when you click on the person's bio, their thumbnail, you can see what their major was in school, if they got a grad school degree, and quote some highlights from the interview. There are also transcripts with every single episode, so you can read it if you prefer, and then click anywhere and hear the audio. So it's totally up to you. There was something else I was going, think about it. Like, what is worse? Staying in an industry because you're afraid to leave, or taking that leap? So what if you fall on your face? I mean, I don't mean to minimize it. It hurts. It hurts, but you're resilient. You'll pick yourself up. I mean, first of all, thank you for your service, Jacqueline. You know, you will be able to power forward. And I will tell you something else. In my pivots, I've had people like, what? You're doing what? At the organizations where I started, okay, well, I don't really see that. You won't necessarily be embraced with a warm hug, but you will demonstrate to people your value. And just because I was fired, I want to let you know, when I was fired from the PR firm, initially I was really embarrassed about that. But then I thought about it, hey, I got a grad degree in public relations and I got paid for it. All right, for a year and 9 months, I was paid to learn on the job. I think I came away with a lot more than they did. And I certainly did a good job and I brought in a lot of business. I just didn't know how to manage.
Great, thank you. Leo, any more questions or?
I think that is the question for today. And Andrea, would you like me to put the link for your
Please. And I also want to invite you to connect with me on LinkedIn. I post every single day, 7 days a week, about careers, tips, insights, advice to help job seekers find their way. And I was going to just copy my LinkedIn profile, and if you can just click on it and follow me. Sorry, I should have copied this ahead of time, but thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm just gonna copy, and if anyone is, I don't know if anyone is looking for something like this, but I think it's geared much more towards college students. I have boot camps running all next month to help those who are confused, stuck, overwhelmed, get career clarity, and then equipping them with the tools, tactics, and strategies to land those jobs. So I just put that out there.
Andrea Koppel, as always, a huge pleasure and privilege to have an opportunity to talk with you and to hear your expertise and to also hear what you've learned through the thousands of interviews and experiences you've had. So I just want to officially thank you and invite all of us to just thank Andrea as well. Real-time clapping, or you can do it virtual, whatever feels right.
Thank you all for showing up. You will get there. You will be able to do it. You just keep powering forward with good energy and keep networking.
Yes, thank you. A good reminder that it's not, if it feels hard, or it's not supposed to be this completely comfortable thing all the time. So thank you for that.
Yeah.
All right, Liao, what should we do?